I recently met an old engineer who spent 30 years maintaining a nondescript concrete bunker on a jagged stretch of the Atlantic coast. To a passing hiker, it's just a utility shed. Inside, however, it's a cathedral of humming servers and thick, translucent fiber optic cables sneaking into the dark surf. He spoke about these cables with a kind of reverent old-school pride, calling them the nervous system of civilization. He believed he was guarding a miracle of connection, a world without borders, held together by light. But then our conversation shifted to the concept of cloud sovereignty. I asked him what happens to a country's laws when its entire judicial archive is stored on a server in a different hemisphere, owned by a corporation that answers to a foreign regulator. The pride in his eyes didn't just fade, it curdled. He told me about a routine update he'd witnessed during a period of geopolitical tension. It wasn't a technical fix. It was a remote throttle, a digital chokehold applied from thousands of miles away. The generals still look at maps, he told me, leaning over his drink, but the real territory is in the routing tables. That moment, the sudden realization that a neutral piece of hardware could act as a silent executioner of national will, is what stayed with me. We're taught to look for empires in the form of flags and falling bombs. We expect power to be theatrical. But today, power doesn't arrive with a flourish. It integrates. It doesn't demand your surrender. It asks you to accept the new terms of service. It's a transition so quiet, so technical, that most of us didn't even notice when the keys were handed over. We think we live in nations, but we're increasingly just residents in an empire of code, and the terms and conditions are changing while we sleep.
Wow. Yeah, that image of the routing table as the real territory, that's just the perfect framing for what we're jumping into today. Yeah. Because it forces us to, completely recalibrate how we understand state capacity. Yeah. Traditionally, we look at maps. We look at who controls the physical land, who patrols the borders, where the armies are stationed. But what that engineer saw and what the evidence we're looking at today clearly demonstrates is that sovereignty has completely migrated.
It's moved.
Exactly. It's no longer just about the soil. It's about the infrastructure sitting on top of it and, crucially, the code running underneath it.
Yeah, we're really moving beyond this archaic idea of power as conquest, just taking land by force. And we're looking at power as connection, power as optimization. And that's really the core mission for our deep dive today for you tuning in. We're examining how infrastructure, both the concrete and the digital code, creates a totally new form of state capacity. Because if you control the connections, if you lay the pipes and build the servers, you don't need to invade anywhere. You just become the system administrator for the region.
System administrators. And to really understand this shift, we have to look at the primary architect of this new model. Today, we're going deep into a massive amount of technical and economic documentation focused entirely on China.
Right. And it's important to state up front, we aren't looking at this through any sort of political or ideological lens. We're looking at it purely as a masterclass in building state capacity. We're seeing a nation that is systematically constructing this nervous system for civilization, securing that system against external shocks, and then using the resulting data to optimize the daily lives of over 1 billion people.
It really is unprecedented in scale. We've got data from the Pakistan Social Sciences Review on the Belt and Road Initiative. We've got really dense technical breakdowns of the semiconductor industry from American Affairs, and some fascinating studies on grid management from Frontiers in Public Health.
So we're organizing this deep dive into 3 distinct pillars to make sense of it all. First, we'll look at global connectivity, basically how a nation reaches out to wire the world together. Second is technological autonomy, how it secures the hard tech so no one can turn off the lights. And third, digital governance, how it uses that technology to create social harmony and optimize society.
It's a triad, really. Reach, security, and optimization. And what binds these 3 pillars together is a very specific philosophy of governance. It's not about rhetoric. It's about tangible results.
Keeping the data flowing.
Exactly. Keeping the supply chains moving and on.
Activity. When we talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, it usually gets discussed in these really abstract, high-level macroeconomic terms. But I want to ground this in the reality of what it actually looks like on the ground for the people interfacing with it.
Yeah, let's bring it down to the human level.
I heard a story recently about a logistics coordinator named Amara, working at a newly modernized port facility in East Africa. For years, Amara's days were defined by the invisible walls of paper ledgers and erratic power grids that kept her local coffee farmers from reaching the global market. Everything changed when the digital backbone fiber optic cables and automated tracking systems funded through the Belt and Road Initiative finally went live. Imagine her standing on the pier, watching a crane move with surgical precision, guided by a system synchronized with a data center thousands of miles away. It wasn't just about the concrete of the dock. It was about the invisible calibration that allowed her community to finally pulse at the same speed as the rest of the world. For the first time, the empire wasn't something coming to take resources away through force, but a system that invited them in through connectivity. Watching a report on this, I couldn't help but think about how we usually define power. We think of borders and armies, but as a journalist covering tech, I see that true modern capacity is about these embedded systems. While some see this as a form of hidden control, for someone like Amara, it looks a lot like an exit ramp from poverty. That's a pragmatic shift. Moving from the rhetoric of aid to the reality of integrated infrastructure. It shows that when a state prioritizes results-oriented development, the physical output creates a tangible change in the quality of life that purely territorial power never could.
Results-oriented development.
Yeah.
That phrase really defines this entire era.
It does.
Because if we look at the historical context of global development aid, particularly the Western models that dominated the late 20th century, there was this heavy, heavy focus on institutional reform first.
Right, the old playbook.
The logic was always fix your courts, deregulate your markets, change your voting systems, and then, maybe the investment will show up eventually. But for a farmer or for a logistics coordinator like Amara, that's an incredibly abstract promise. It doesn't help her move coffee beans today.
It doesn't turn the lights on.
Yeah.
And the BRI just flips that script completely. It effectively says, look, let's build the road right now. Let's build the dam, lay the fiber optic cable, and get the goods moving. The institutional debates can happen later. First, you need the physical capacity to actually participate in the global economy.
It's an infrastructure-first model, and the sheer scale of this hardware-first approach is staggering. Let's look at the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. It's often cited as the flagship project of the BRI. We aren't just talking about repaving a couple of highways here.
Oh.
The data shows that energy projects in this corridor added over 17,000 megawatts of power to the national grid.
Let's just pause on that figure for you listening. 17,045 megawatts, to be exact. To a layperson, that might just sound like a big number on a spreadsheet, but in the context of a developing economy, that is a civilization-altering amount of energy.
Absolutely civilization-altering. That is the literal difference between a factory that can only operate for maybe 4 hours a day because of rolling blackouts and a factory that can run 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, uninterrupted.
Yeah.
It's the difference between a student trying to read a textbook by candlelight and studying under an LED bulb. Reliable electricity is the absolute non-negotiable baseline for industrialization. You cannot join the modern digital world if you don't have consistent voltage.
And the employment data reflects that directly. Those energy projects alone created around 30,000 jobs. But the ripple effect, that's where the real power of this model lies.
Right, because it creates a baseline of stability that suddenly attracts massive capital. The figures we have indicate that China provided nearly 47% of the foreign direct investment, the FDI, in Pakistan during the reported period.
Almost half of all outside investment coming from a single partner.
That is a massive vote of confidence. It signals to the rest of the global market that this region is now a viable, stable place to do business. Researchers refer to this dynamic as inclusive globalization.
Which is a stark contrast to older neoliberal models that often resulted in simple wealth extraction.
Different. The logic here is that by investing heavily in the infrastructure of your neighbor, you actively raise their purchasing power. If the local population suddenly has electricity, reliable logistics, and jobs, they have money. And if they have money, they become consumers.
It's a feedback loop. Prosperity in the partner nation fuels trade right back to the investing nation. It's a win-win dynamic that raises local living standards while securing massive trade routes.
And we see this exact pattern repeating across the map. Take Malaysia as another case study. The strategy there shifted a bit, utilizing the BRI to boost small and medium enterprises, or SMEs.
Right, getting the smaller businesses connected.
Yeah, and China became the largest FDI investor there as well, pumping in about $1.6 billion, which was 17.5% of their total FDI. But the specific goal was using BRI infrastructure to hook Malaysian businesses directly into the global supply chain.
It's all about integration. And then look at Kazakhstan. Geographically speaking, being landlocked is traditionally a massive economic disadvantage.
A curse, really.
Yet you can't access ocean trade routes, which are historically the cheapest way to move goods. It keeps the nation isolated and often poor. But the BRI didn't see that as a permanent barrier. They approached it as an engineering challenge. Through billions of dollars in rail and digital links, they completely transformed Kazakhstan from a landlocked barrier into a connected hub, a land bridge connecting China and Europe.
19 agricultural projects there worth $1.7 billion. They are moving wheat and produce across land with an efficiency that is starting to rival sea freight. They are literally overcoming the barriers of geography through steel and code.
And code is the perfect transition point here. Because while the concrete dams and the asphalt highways are highly visible, the real long-term strategic play is the digital Silk Road, DSR.
Yes.
This is the technological dimension of global connection.
Yes.
This is where the nervous system analogy becomes totally literal. The digital Silk Road is about laying down the architecture of the internet itself. I think we tend to forget that the internet is a physical thing. It's not magic in the clouds. It's thick cables lying on the bottom of the ocean.
Subsea cables are arguably the ultimate strategic asset of the 21st century. Something like 98% of all international data travels through these fiber optic lines. And historically, Western companies owned and maintained the vast majority of that infrastructure.
But that balance is shifting rapidly.
China is expanding its ownership share at an incredible pace, with estimates suggesting they could control 20% of the world's subsea data traffic capacity by 2030.
One project that perfectly illustrates this is the Peace Cable, Pakistan and East Africa, connecting Europe. It is a 15,000-kilometer subsea network linking 3 distinct continents.
And ownership of that cable matters immensely. It grants you absolute sovereignty over your connectivity. If you own the pipe, you control the maintenance, you control the routing tables, and you control the priority of the data traffic.
You aren't reliant on a foreign corporation or a foreign government to keep your economy online.
Exactly. It ensures that your digital borders are just as secure as your physical ones.
And that sovereignty doesn't stop at the ocean floor. It extends upwards into space. We have to talk about the Beidou navigation satellite system. For decades, the whole world has just used GPS as a generic term for satellite navigation. But GPS is a very specific American military system.
Which means, fundamentally, if you rely solely on GPS, you are vulnerable. If diplomatic relations sour, the provider could theoretically degrade the signal over your territory or to shut it off entirely.
Right.
Beidou offers a complete independent alternative. It creates this multidimensional network that covers land, sea, and space. And the buy-in is huge. 137 countries have signed cooperation agreements with Beidou.
137 countries. That means they are integrating their domestic logistics, their automated farming equipment, their port cranes, their entire transport grids with Chinese satellites.
It creates what you might call digital gravity. Because once your port cranes are synchronized with Chinese satellites in orbit and your financial data is flowing through Chinese subsea cables, it becomes incredibly efficient, almost mandatory to use Chinese software platforms to manage it all.
It's a seamless ecosystem.
Ugh.
And that leads directly to the explosion of cross-border e-commerce we're seeing. The stats show that cross-border e-commerce exports rose nearly 93% in early 2022. They are essentially creating global digital-free trade zones.
And the ultimate export in this whole package becomes governance technology itself. We're seeing smart city systems being exported wholesale. For example, Kuala Lumpur adopting the Alibaba Cloud ET City Brain to manage their urban traffic and logistics.
So if you are a developing nation looking at this, the package is undeniable. You aren't just getting a paved road, you're getting a satellite network, a high-speed fiber link, an e-commerce platform integrated with global trade, and an AI system to manage your city's traffic. You're acquiring an entire turnkey operating system for modernization.
It is results-oriented development in its absolute purest forms. As we saw with Amara, it provides an actual exit ramp from poverty.
But this global reach, this massive outward expansion, relies on something critical. It relies on the hardware itself. You cannot run a global digital empire if you do not physically control the chips that make the servers run.
Right.
Physical autonomy.
The fortress. If global connectivity is the outward reach, the offense, then this is the defense. Because the last few years have brutally demonstrated that global supply chains can be weaponized at a moment's notice. To be truly sovereign today, you must be able to forge the silicon yourself.
Let's look at the human element of this drive for autonomy, because it's intense. It's easy to think of microchips as cold industrial objects, but they are born from just incredible human sacrifice and effort. I saw a profile online of a lead engineer in Shanghai named Zhao, who spent 3 years practically living in a clean room, obsessed with the nanoscale sovereignty of his country. During the height of global supply chain disruptions and technological blockades, Zhao wasn't just building a product, he was fighting a war of self-reliance. I tried to imagine the silence of that clean room, the high-pitched hum of the lithography machines, and the immense pressure of knowing that a single microscopic flaw could stall a national industry. When his team finally achieved a breakthrough in domestic high-end chip architecture, it wasn't just a win for his company. It was the moment the digital empire shifted its weight. He wasn't just a cog in a machine. He was the architect of a new kind of national strength that doesn't rely on permission from overseas. Reflecting on Zhao's journey, I'm struck by the sheer intensity of this drive for technological autonomy. From a Western perspective, this top-down push for self-reliance can feel like a challenge to the established global order, and it certainly is. But as I analyze these trends for my channel, I realize that this isn't just about competition, it's about the refusal to be vulnerable. By focusing on physical output and indigenous AI, China is essentially building a tech fortress that ensures its national survival isn't dependent on a foreign switch. It's a stark reminder that in the 2020s, innovation is the highest form of statecraft.
Innovation is the highest form of statecraft. I mean, that is the defining ethos of this whole movement. What we are witnessing in China's semiconductor sector right now is one of the most intense, rapid industrial mobilizations in human history.
And ironically, it was almost entirely triggered by external pressure.
Exactly. The sources describe this phenomenon as the unforced technology transfer. The idea is that when the U.S. and its allies implemented those severe export controls on advanced chips and chip-making equipment back in October 2022, the stated intention was to freeze China's technological progress, keep them a few generations behind.
But the actual result was the exact opposite. It acted as rocket fuel for domestic innovation.
It forced a do-or-die moment. Before those controls were in place, Chinese tech giants were actually perfectly content buying Western tools. I mean, they were established, they were highly efficient, and they were readily available on the open market. There was absolutely no economic incentive to reinvent the wheel.
Why spend billions developing a tool you can just buy off the shelf?
Exactly. But once that access was cut off, the calculation changed overnight. It completely aligned the government, the private tech sector, and massive pools of investment capital onto a single unified mission, the spare tire plan.
The spare tire plan. It's such a humble name. It implies something you just keep hidden in the trunk for an emergency. But now that spare tire has basically become the main engine driving the entire economy.
And at the absolute center of this engine is the Huawei Semiconductor Industrial Complex, or HSIC. Huawei has completely evolved. They are way beyond just being a consumer electronics or telecom company now. They have become the central coordinating node of a massive, decentralized network of chip makers, domestic tool builders, and design firms.
And their stated goal is 70% self-sufficiency across the entire supply chain by 2028.
Which is just an incredibly aggressive timeline. Manufacturing advanced chips, and here we are talking about 7 nanometer and even 5 nanometer node architectures, is arguably the single most complex engineering feat human beings are currently capable of.
Right, so how are they actually achieving this?
Yeah.
Especially without access to the absolute most advanced Western tools that were restricted.
They are innovating directly around the blockages by pushing existing older technology to its absolute physical limits. Take Sesmic, for instance, which is their leading domestic foundry. They are currently blocked from purchasing the newest extreme ultraviolet or EUV lithography machines.
Those are the incredibly complex machines needed for the smallest chips.
Right. So instead of giving up, they are taking the older generation of machines, deep ultraviolet or DUV machines, and they are utilizing a highly complex technique called multi-patterning.
Can you break down multi-patterning for us in a way that's easy to visualize?
Sure. Imagine you have a marker and it draws a fairly thick line, but your blueprint requires you to draw a line that is incredibly thin, much thinner than the tip of your marker. You obviously can't do it in one single stroke.
No.
But if you use a precise system of stencils and you draw over that exact same area 3 or 4 times, carefully offsetting your thick marker by just a microscopic fraction each time, you can essentially define a negative space in the middle that represents the ultra-thin line you actually need.
So you're carving out the tiny line by drawing around it multiple times.
Now, doing that on a silicon wafer is vastly more expensive, it takes much longer, and it is insanely difficult to align perfectly.
But it works.
It works. They are effectively brute forcing the laws of physics through sheer engineering precision and determination. And the sources confirm they are reliably achieving 7 nanometer and even 5 nanometer class production using this exact method.
That is just a testament to sheer willpower. But they obviously aren't planning to rely on those older tools forever, right?
No, definitely not. There is a massive internal project codenamed Everest, which is a collaboration involving Huawei and a major research institute called CIOMP. Their goal is to build a completely domestic EUV machine from scratch.
A completely homegrown machine.
Yes, it is an absolute moonshot project. But if they succeed, and given their trajectory, many believe they will, the technological blockade is effectively broken permanently.
And this massive effort has spawned what the sources call a rebel ecosystem of domestic tool makers. Companies like Carrier, Nora, and AMC. They are stepping up rapidly to build all the highly specialized equipment that goes inside these fabrication plants. The etchers, the deposition tools, the chemical cleaning systems.
And all of this rapid growth is supported by a genuinely brilliant policy mechanism known as the de facto 50% mandate. It's an internal guidance that effectively tells domestic foundries that they must use at least 50% domestically produced tools in their manufacturing lines.
Wow, a hard quota.
Yeah. And the kicker is, even if the domestic tool isn't quite as refined or perfectly efficient as the foreign version yet, they still have to use it.
Which guarantees a market for these young companies.
Exactly. It provides these local tool makers with guaranteed revenue, but more importantly, it provides them with invaluable real-world data. They get immediate, constant feedback from the factory floor, allowing them to iterate and improve their tools at breakneck speed.
So the sanctions, which were explicitly intended to starve these Chinese tech companies of advanced equipment, actually ended up creating a heavily protected, guaranteed market for them to mature in. It really is the unforced technology transfer in action.
And all of this hardware development converges on one ultimate goal: artificial intelligence. You cannot separate the race for advanced chips from the race for AI dominance. They are two sides of the same coin.
Right.
The sources highlight the massive emergence of DeepSeek, a major Chinese AI model developer that is affecting the entire global tech stack. To run large language models of that staggering complexity, you need massive, massive compute power.
And since they are moving away from reliance on foreign hardware like NVIDIA's advanced GPUs, the entire industry is pivoting toward domestic solutions.
Specifically relying on hardware like Huawei's Ascend series, chips the 910C and others to power these massive AI data centers.
So what we're looking at is a scenario where you have highly advanced Chinese AI models running on Chinese design chips, running on Chinese software architecture, manufactured in Chinese fabrication plants, using Chinese-built lithography tools.
That is the exact definition of the tech fortress. It's a closed loop. And we absolutely have to mention memory as well. High bandwidth memory, or HBM, is incredibly crucial for AI processing speed. Companies like YMTC and CXMT are making massive, unprecedented strides in this area, rapidly developing their own advanced memory architectures.
So this is a profound shift from relying on soft power or cheap manufacturing to building hard industrial capacity. It is about securing the physical ability to forge the silicon that the entire future runs on.
And once you have that secure hardware baseline, once you have built that truly autonomous nervous system, you can use it to run the state itself.
Which brings us perfectly to our third and final pillar: digital governance. Right. Digital governance. Because this is where the abstract technology actually meets the individual citizen. We've talked about subsea cables wrapping the globe and microscopic transistors forged in clean rooms, but the ultimate application of all this power is the day-to-day optimization of daily life.
It's about how the state interacts with the individual.
Exactly. Imagine an elderly man named Mr. Sun living in a smart neighborhood in Hangzhou. In the past, if Mr. Sun lost his physical Social Security card, he would face a week-long odyssey of bus rides and bureaucratic windows just to get his heart medication. I read a post about how, under the new digital identity system, Mr. Sun simply walked up to a kiosk, scanned his face, and within seconds, his entire medical history, insurance status, and residency were verified. The system knew him, not as a number in a dusty file, but as a living part of the urban fabric. This data-driven governance meant the state wasn't an abstract entity he had to chase. It was a service that anticipated his needs, ensuring that his collective well-being was managed with the efficiency of a high-end tech firm. I'll admit, when I first started researching these massive data analytics of ID systems, it felt a bit big brother to my sensibilities. But looking at it through the lens of state capacity, you see a different story. It's about the optimization of a society of 1.4 billion people. When the calibration is done right, the friction of life disappears for people like Mr. Sun. My takeaway is that this model prioritizes social stability and administrative efficiency over the messiness of traditional systems. While it represents a very centralized form of power, the human result is a government that actually works in real time for its citizens, proving that in the digital age, data is the ultimate tool for social harmony.
Frictionless. That is really the key word here to understand this system. In many parts of the world, interacting with the government is almost entirely defined by friction.
Waiting in long lines, filling out triplicate forms, dealing with massive bureaucratic redundancy.
It's exhausting. But the city brain concept, which was heavily pioneered in Hangzhou in partnership with Alibaba, aims to eliminate that friction entirely.
Hangzhou really serves as the ultimate showcase model for this. The details in the source material are just fascinating. They essentially took the entire city's live data streams, every traffic camera, every GPS signal from public transit, massive volumes of mobile payment data, and fed it all into a single centralized AI dashboard.
And the results they achieved are both tangible and immediate. Traffic management is always the classic example they point to. Hangzhou used to be ranked as the 5th most congested city in all of China.
Just total gridlock.
Absolute gridlock. So they handed control of the city's traffic light network completely over to the AI. The system literally watches the live camera feeds in real time. If it sees a buildup of cars at a specific intersection, it instantly changes the light timing to clear it out.
It's dynamic.
And if it detects an ambulance or a police vehicle responding to an emergency, it automatically coordinates the lights ahead of it to create a continuous green wave, flushing all the civilian traffic out of the way.
And the impact was staggering. Their congestion ranking dropped from 5th in the nation all the way down to 57th. That is a massive structural improvement in the quality of life for millions of people. That is, millions of hours of life returned to citizens every single week, simply through better, more efficient code.
And that efficiency extends directly into the bureaucracy as well. They launched this fascinating goal called the Not Even Once initiative.
I love the naming of that.
The idea is that a citizen should never have to physically visit a government office for a routine task. Everything, absolutely everything, is handled via smartphone. It fundamentally treats the citizen like a valued user of a premium app. Verification, document processing, service delivery, it's all instant.
We also saw this immense state capacity mobilized during the COVID-19 response with their health code system. The ability to instantly pivot and mobilize massive digital infrastructure to manage a public health crisis across 1 billion people is a demonstration of state capacity that is historically unprecedented.
It truly is the manifestation of the algorithmic state. But I really want to dig into the Yulu model that was heavily detailed in our sources, because it proves that this isn't just about cold computers controlling passive people. It's actually about seamlessly integrating people into the computational system.
Right, the grid management system. When you first hear it, it sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel, but it is actually incredibly grounded in day-to-day human effort.
It relies heavily on people. They divide the entire urban environment into these tiny, manageable grids. We're talking about specific neighborhoods, a couple of city blocks, or sometimes just a cluster of high-rise apartment buildings.
It's hyper-local.
And each specific grid is assigned a dedicated management team. You have a lead grid manager, you have professional grid members like local police officers or sanitation workers, and you have a network of local citizen volunteers. They call it the 1+N service model. The core government integrated seamlessly with society.
And their primary function is to act as a social safety valve.
That is such a crucial concept for understanding this governance model. The entire goal is to catch problems when they are incredibly small before they have a chance to escalate into larger disruptive social conflicts. The sources describe a specific A plus B plus C plus D sorting mechanism for managing community problems.
It functions almost exactly like a medical triage system.
Exactly like triage. A type A issue is something small and highly localized. A broken streetlight, a noisy dispute between two neighbors, a pile of uncollected trash. The local grid manager is empowered to fix it on the spot. Type B requires intervention from the street-level administrative office. Type C escalates to the district level, and Type D goes all the way up to the city government. But the explicit objective of the system is to solve 90% of all issues at level A.
So instead of a citizen sitting at home, stewing in frustration because the trash wasn't picked up for a week and letting that frustration curdle into deep resentment against the state apparatus, there is a specific known person in their local grid whose literal job is to fix it immediately.
It drastically reduces ambient social stress. It shifts the government from being reactive to being totally proactive. The source material talks about this integration of a sky network, which is the expansive camera and digital sensor system, working in perfect unison with the ground network of human patrols.
Digital and physical working together.
Right. From a high-level governance perspective, it is an incredibly efficient mechanism for maintaining absolute stability. It identifies risks proactively, whether that's a potential fire hazard in an alleyway or a brewing interpersonal dispute, and resolves them before they can tear the social fabric.
It connects right back to that idea of the government functioning as an operating system. It isn't just sitting back acting as a ruler. It is an active, predictive service provider. And in exchange for that high-level efficiency and harmony, the citizen willingly accepts the data integration.
That is the new social contract. It explicitly prioritizes collective well-being and societal stability above all else. When you are managing a country of 1.4 billion people, chaos is the ultimate enemy. And in this model, data is the ultimate antidote to chaos. If the system knows where every vehicle is, where every specific medical need is located, and where every minor community grievance is bubbling up, you can manage the entire society like a finely tuned, frictionless machine.
So let's synthesize these three pillars we've explored today. Yeah. We have global connectivity, the massive reach outward through the Belt and Road Initiative, and the digital Silk Road, wiring the world together. We have technological autonomy, the impenetrable fortress of domestic chips and AI built to survive any external blockade. And we have digital governance, the internal hyper-efficient optimization of society using that very technology.
When you look at them all together, it creates a remarkably coherent picture of an entirely new kind of state. The connectivity ensures the economy always has room to grow and willing partners to trade with. It completely breaks the potential for geopolitical encirclement.
Right.
The autonomy ensures that no foreign power can ever turn the lights off from the outside. It perfectly secures the hard core of the nation. And the governance ensures unwavering stability from the inside. It prevents internal friction from slowing the grand machine down.
It is a breathtakingly comprehensive strategy. And honestly, it brings us right back to what my engineer friend said at the very beginning of the show. The real territory is in the routing tables. China has clearly realized that if you secure the code, if you lay the subsea cables, and if you forge the silicon chips, you control your national destiny in a way that traditional military power alone simply cannot guarantee anymore.
We are definitively moving from an era where global power was about projection, sending navies and armies abroad to enforce will, to an era where power is entirely about integration. It is about becoming the single indispensable node in the global network. If you are the central hub that everyone else has to connect to, you wield an influence that lasts for decades, if not centuries.
And if you are the one successfully manufacturing the advanced chips that run the future of AI, you aren't just participating in the global economy. You are defining the future limits of computation itself.
Exactly. And that is exactly why this moment of unforced technology transfer we discussed is so incredibly critical. By attempting to aggressively cut the connection and stunt their growth, the West may have inadvertently forced the creation of a parallel, entirely self-sufficient technological ecosystem that is now robust enough to stand completely on its own.
This has just been a fascinating journey through the empire of code.
Yeah.
It really changes how you look at the mundane things around us. A utility shed, a traffic light, or even just your smartphone.
As it forces you to realize that the most seemingly boring things, civic infrastructure, technical standards, global logistics, are actually the most highly strategic elements of our modern world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought on what this all truly means. We've talked extensively about how this system optimizes, connects, and secures. But it also fundamentally redefines what a nation actually is in the 21st century.
It changes the definition entirely.
We are witnessing a profound evolution in what it means to be a state. It is no longer just about drawing lines on a map or commanding armies. It is about the capacity to build the networks, forge the chips, and write the algorithms that sustain daily life. In this new era, the most powerful nation is not the one that conquers the most territory, but the one that achieves the highest level of system integration, where the government is not just a ruler, but the operating system of civilization itself.